Chapter 4, Dynasty XII. This is a monster chapter. Manetho states that the princes of the 12th dynasty were of Theban origin, which is more than probable since the Entefs and Mentuhotets, what was that guy's name? Nataju Hattup have left memorials of themselves in that city. The sanctuary of the great temple of Yemen at Karnak, whose ruins are covered with the names of the kings of this house, was gradually enlarged from the time of its foundation to the grandeur of an imperial edifice whose stone walls reveal to us the history of the Theban kings. The high distinction of this dynasty does not rest so much on the greatness of the kings as on the wisdom of their government at home and the glory of their victories abroad. Art also was cherished by these rulers, and from the hands of skillful masters arose an immense number of beautiful buildings and pictures. It is from the accession of the 12th dynasty that a more harmonious form of beauty meets the eye of the beholder, alike in architecture and in sculpture. Yemen Hot, with the regal name Ra Sahattup Yub. And here, let me say. Such is the name of the ruler who greets us on the threshold of this dynasty as the leader of his race. Unless the evidence deceives us, he is a descendant of the prince of the same name who under Nub Ta'u Man Nataju Hattup received the command to bring enormous stones from the valley of Hammamat, and by so doing earned the praise of the king. His elevation to the throne was no peaceful hereditary succession, but a struggle for the crown. In the instructions which Ibn Mahat Yemen Namhat the first wrote for his son, according to the Salier Papyrus 2, he speaks of the trouble which consumed the land from internal wars and conspirators who sought to murder the king. After peace and order were reestablished, the signal was given for external wars. A memorial stone now in London bears witness that the power of the king extended beyond the limits of the empire. His dominion in the south is confirmed by an inscription engraved on a mass of rock on the road from Korosoko, which records his victory over the inhabitants of the land of Uwat, which country probably coincided with the auriferous valley of Olakti, which extends northwards from Korosoko to the sea. The historical information on this stone is also confirmed by a contemporary papyri, which tells us of external campaigns and wars carried on against foreign nations such as the Maza'a, the Sathe, the Herusha, and other rabble in the south and north. In the east and west, beside military operations, the service of the entities lay near to the sovereign's heart. He was the founder of the Temple of Yemen Bepis, where his own portrait, executed in rose-colored granite from Aswan, bore witness to his work. Memphis also, the Fayoum, and other places were chosen to be adorned with statues and temples. And even if the last stones of these works were silent, the ancient quarries in the limestone hill of Mokattam and in the valleys of the much frequented Wadi Hammamat would tell the tale. Yemen Nemhat followed the ancient custom of the Memphite kings and built himself for an eternal dwelling his own pyramid with the name of Ah, I mean Ah, Ka the fur, beautiful and high. This pharaoh carefully provided during his lifetime a stone sarcophagus as the receptacle of his body. So you see that hill thing is the Q, and they're leaving off the Q in the transliteration here. So KQA, not the easiest way to pronounce things. I mean, for an English line, but this pharaoh carefully provided during his lifetime a stone sarcophagus as the receptacle for his body. The chief of the priests of Amsu and Tef, the son of Sebek Next, was next to the mountain of Rohanu in the Wadi Hammamat to cut the stone for the sarcophagus from the wall of the rock, and to roll the precious burthen so immensely great that never the like had been provided since the time of Ra, down the valley to the plain of Egypt. Of the internal condition of the country, we may learn something from the story of Sennacherib. From some unknown cause, he fled from the court and endeavored to escape the land by the northeastern frontier. Here he encountered difficulties, first from the keepers of the roads, then from the foreign tribes settled on the frontier. Escaping the vigilance of the watchmen on the wall, he reached the desert in safety, and in length gained the little kingdom of Tenu in the land of Edom, where he was invited to the court of Yemen Usha, the king, who gave him his daughter in marriage in the fruitful district of Aa as his residence. Here he lived prosperously for many years until at last, being seized with an intense desire to see his native land, he obtained permission to return. Pharaoh received him cordially, loaded him with honors, and even had his grave erected for him. Yemen Nemhat reigned the last 10 years of his life in common with his son Usertsen, who was still a boy, and to whom his father addressed the instructions already mentioned. Ra, Xper, Ka, and User Sert son the first. Those cartouches. Under his rule, the land gradually became quiet and order was completely reestablished. Yemen Nemhat the first had been obliged to pass through the revolted country with his soldiers in order to meet and subdue his opponents. It was reserved for his son Usur son to win back to win back men's minds by gaining, first of all, the favor of the priests by buildings in honor of the national entities considered to be divinities, works whose ruins exist until the present day. This king is first mentioned in the inscription on the obelisk of Heliopolis, in the immediate neighborhood of the village of Bataria. The Egyptians gave the old town the name of Anu, obelisks of the north. Here, there existed from the very earliest known times a temple to worship Tamu and his wife as sun god and sun goddess, to whom the pharaohs were wont to make pilgrimages in order to fulfill certain sacred rites. The temple and town lay about 6 feet below the present level of the soil and nearly 11.5 feet below that of the high Nile. The long earthen mounds of the circumvallation are now the only visible remains of the city of Heliopolis. The temple at On already existed in the time of Usur Sarkson I, for it is often mentioned in the inscriptions of the reigns of his royal ancestors. The erection of the obelisks proves also that the building was finished as far as the entrance towers, before which it was the custom to raise these giant needles. But a remarkable document on parchment now in the Berlin Museum makes the fact certain that Usur Sarkson I, at the very beginning of his reign, occupied himself with buildings at the temple of the city of the sun. This memorial informs us how, in the 3rd year of his reign, he assembled the first officials of his court to hear their opinions and their counsel as to his intentions of raising worthy buildings to whom he considered to be a sun god. And gave commands to the proper court official to watch over the uninterrupted progress of the work which he was determined upon, and then began the solemn ceremony of laying the foundation stone. The 4 sides of the great obelisk were deeply cut with beautiful hieroglyphs in the red granite, which run thus: the Horus of the sun, the life for those that are born, the king of the upper and lower country, Kheper Ka Ra, the lord of the double crown, the life for those who are born, the son of the sun god Ra, Usartsen, the friend of the spirits of On, ever living, the golden Horus, the life for those who are born, the gracious god, Kheper Ka Ra, has executed his work. At the beginning of a 30 years cycle, he is the dispenser of life forevermore. Usur Sarkson I must have had a special predilection for this mode of perpetuating his name. At least, remains which have been discovered in other parts attest his inclination for the erection of stone obelisks in the ancient province of the Lake of Moaris near Bagig are the fragments of a similar memorial, which, according to the inscription, was executed by the king in honor of the local entities of the capital. You know, those entities considered the gods. As his father, Iman the Hat, had begun to lay the foundations of the latter temple at Karnak, to the east of the granite building of the chief sanctuary, so his son Usur Sarkson enlarged it as a proof of his veneration for Yemen. His care was not confined to the dwelling of the entity only, but also to that of his chief servants. He dedicated to them a separate place, which bore the name of the holy dwelling of the first seers of Yemen. Though no traces of this ancient building exist, the fact is proved by an inscription found at Thebes, which relates to its restoration in the reign of Ra Musu X by Imhotep, the first seer of Yemen, who restored the great court and the dwelling of the first seers, defraying the cost himself. Now, if you face east, south is on the right hand, so hence why the right hand in Semitic languages became Yemen. As I found the holy dwelling of the first seers of Yemen, who of old sat in the house of Yemen, the king of the gods, hastening to decay, for what there was of it dated to the time of King Usur Sertson the first. I caused it to be built anew in beautiful forms and tasteful work. I restored the thickness of the surrounding wall from behind to the front part. I caused the buildings to be raised and their columns to be set up of hard stone in tasteful work. One of the celebrated rock tombs has preserved some historical memorials of Usur Sertson the First. It is the same tomb which always attracts the attention of the visitor by the new form of the pillar, by the design of the front, and by the peculiar richness of its pictures. Chiseled in the rocks was the sacrificial hall dedicated to the service of the dead, who belonged to a noble family holding hereditary possession of the neighboring district. Here, Yemeni, the head of a family, relates the incidents of its life as follows. In the year 43, under the rule of King Usur the First, may he live long, even to all eternity, which corresponds with the year 25, in the nome of Ma, where the hereditary Lord Yemen was governor. In the year 43, on the 14th day of the month, Pa'afi, address to those who enjoy life and to whom death is hateful, let them recite the prayer of the offerings of the dead in the favor of the hereditary governor-in-chief of the nome of Ma, and some other titles are listed thereafter. The chief over the holy seer, Yemen, was conquered. I accompanied my lord when he made an expedition to smite his enemies in the country of Atu. I went with him as the son of the most noble lord, who was captain of the warriors and governor of the nome of Ma, as substitute for my father, who was old and who had received his reward from the king's palace, for he was beloved at court. I entered the country of Kush, nicknamed the land of the Negroes. I mean, nowadays they nickname Kush the land of the Negroes, which is nowadays not. It's a racial, not a racist statement, but it doesn't sound right, does it? Ascending the river, and the way brought me to the uttermost boundary of the land. I convoyed the booty of my master, the spoils of war, and my praise reached the heaven when his majesty returned home successful. He had smitten his enemies in the miserable country of Cush. I returned home in his retinue with a joyful countenance. Not one of my warriors was missing. Again I went up to the river to convoy the golden treasures to his majesty, King Son. May he live long. I went with the king's eldest son and heir to the throne. Imni, life, strong and health be to him. I went with the number of 400 chosen persons of my warriors. They returned home successful. No one was missing. I brought back the gold. That was the beginning of my distinctions on the part of the kings. My father praised me. After that, I again went up the river to convoy the treasures to the town of Coptus in company with the hereditary lord and chief governor of the town, Uther-Thartson. Life, strength, and health be to him. I went up with 400 men, chosen out of the strongest people of the nome of Ma. I arrived happily. My warriors will certify all that I have said. I was a kind master of a gentle character, a governor who loved his city. I passed many a year as governor in the nome of Ma. All the works for the palace of the king were placed in my hands. Also the chiefs of the temples of the nome of Ma gave me thousands of cows with their calves. I received thanks for this. On the part of the royal palace, because of the yearly supply of milch cows, I gave up all the produce to the palace, and I kept back nothing for myself. Out of all the workshops, no child of the poor did I afflict, no widow did I oppress, no landowner did I displace, no herdsman did I drive away, from no 5-hand master did I take away his men for my own works. No one was unhappy in my time. No one was hungry in my days, not even in the years of famine, for I had tilled all the fields of the nome of Ma up to its southern and northern frontiers. Thus I prolonged the life of its inhabitants and preserved the food which it produced. No hungry man was in it. I distributed equally to the widow as to the married woman. I did not prefer the great to the humble in all that I gave away. And when the inundations of the Nile were great, then the owner of the seed was master of his property. Nothing of the produce of the field was withdrawn from him by my hand. The concluding words of this inscription have given rise to the idea that they contain an allusion to the sojourn of Joseph in Egypt and of the 7 years of famine. Okay, I would have not really guessed that, but two reasons especially tell against this supposition. First, there is a difference in the time, which cannot be made to agree with the days of Joseph, and the next, the indisputable fact that in other inscriptions years of famine are mentioned, which thoroughly correspond with the biblical account, are the two possible dates, right? What, 1700s and 1400s? I don't know. What the inscription of Imne does really teach, from a historical point of view, is that a military expedition up the river was directed against the black people of the land of Cush, who dwelt from the Egyptian frontier at Sian, southwards up to the sources of the Nile. The names of the races of the land of Cush, conquered by the first Usertsen, are perhaps rather the names of the countries inhabited by them, are preserved on a memorial stone which is found in the neighborhood of Wadi Halfa, a little above the second cataract. This was, without a doubt, the last point to which Usertsen extended his campaign against the above-mentioned inhabitants of the Negro land. Oh, come on, Africa's really... Is there any country in Africa that wasn't such until, I guess, you say Israel invading from the north? Because you see at a time, over by Turkey, you go down to the south, you got Africa. You go over to the side, you got Asia. Well, to the south is Israel and all that. So, the land that they now call Israel was on that map, but and you dig them up, they don't look like these light-skinned Jews. The side pushing southward into the gold district of Nubia, the Usertsen also directed his attention to the caverns and mountains of the Sinaitic Peninsula, the mines of which had already been worked under the Memphite kings. New settlers were sent to the lonely valleys of this district to work up Mafkat, turquoise. The green mineral termed Mafkat appears to have been of two kinds. The first was marked genuine. It was, in all probability, the emerald. The second, called imitation, is thought to have been either malachite or smalt. Turquoise was important. Lapis lazuli was even more important, but they didn't find that in that region. Had to get it from Afghanistan and stuff. And copper. Some inscriptions of the Egyptian workmen whom the king sent there still bear witness to their presence in the valley of Magara. The road from Egypt to Sinai led from the lowlands of the delta by the narrow road along which the lands of the delta by the narrow road along with Sinai was obliged to pass in his flight from Egypt to Edom. Here also on the eastern side of the lowlands, traces of Usertsen showed themselves. In Tanis, the great city of the lower country, surrounded on all sides by races of Semitic origin, the kings of the 12th dynasty raised buildings and sepulchres. Not sepulchres, sculptures, that their pillars might do honor even to those they consider to be gods. The portrait of Usertsen himself has been found on several fragments of this perished world of temples. Among the numerous nobles who once served the king was Mentuhotep, whose tombstone, covered with inscriptions, is now at Giza. According to the custom of the time, he's introduced as sometimes speaking himself, sometimes is spoken of. A man learned in the law, a legislator, one who is apportioned the offices, who regulated the works of the nome, who restored order in the whole land, who carried out all the behests of the king, and who, as a judge, gave decisions and restored to the owner his property, as chief architect as chief architect of the king, he promoted the worship of whom they consider to be gods, and constructed the inhabitants of the country according to the best of his knowledge, even as God has commanded to be done. He protected the unfortunate and freed him who was in want of freedom. Again, peace was in the utterances of his mouth, and the written learning of the wise. Dahote, thought, was on his tongue, very skillful in the artistic work. With his own hand, he carried out his designs as they ought to be done. Being the first in the country, the king's heart was full of him. Also the great and distinguished men of the court gave him their love. He knew what was hidden in the heart of every man, and appreciated a man according to his true value. He compelled the enemies of the king to submit to the court of justice of the 30. He punished the foreigners, reduced the Harusha to quiet, and made peace with the Negroes. He was governor in the cities of Ant and the lands of Tesheret. He gave his orders to the land of the south and imposed the taxes on the north country. In a word, Man Atashu Hataptap, who was also invested with several priestly dignities and was Pharaoh's treasurer, appeared as the alter ego of the king. I think back there I made like a duck sound accidentally when I was talking or something. I'm sick, so. When he arrived, the great personages bowed down before him at the outer door of the royal palace. The panegyric, which occupies 22 lines, finishes with a remark relating to certain buildings. Those referred to are the temple of Yesir, Osiris, and the construction of a well at Abydos, both entrusted to him by the special order of the king. He says on this subject, I was who carried out the work of the building of the temple and made the well according to the order of the majesty of the royal lord. The well is probably the same which the Greek geographer Strabo relates that in Mamnonium of Abydos there was a well, to the bottom of which was an arched passage constructed of single stones, admirable for size and workmanship. An overseer of the temple of Abydos, by name Yemenasena, Yemenaseneb, who lived in the days of the sovereign just mentioned, says, this prince gave me the order saying thus, thou art commissioned to cleanse the temple of Abydos. Workmen shall be given thee for this purpose, and the temple servants of the district of the holy workplace. And I cleansed it from top to bottom, and its walls which surrounded the interior, and the writings were filled up with colors, emblems, and other ornamental work. And thus, what King Xerxes the first had built was restored. Long after Seti the first, the temple, which had suffered much, was rebuilt. Among the number of other servants of the king must be named Mary, the son of Munxtu, from the inscription in the Louvre, dated in the 9th year of the reign of Usertsen. It seems clear that Marie received orders to construct for his royal master the sublime place of long duration, or in other words, the sepulchre on a grand scale, with columns, gates, and a great front court, all executed in well-hewn limestone from quarries of Tura. The inscription runs as follows: I was an intelligent servant, distinguished in my works, pleasant as a palm tree. My lord entrusted to me a commission, grandly conceived, to erect for him the lofty, long-enduring place of his sepulchre. It was to tower up, conspicuous on all sides, from every place, corresponding to the excellency of the Divine One. You know, they talked about the kings like they were gods. Pillars were out to support the roof. A canal was dug to let in the water of the river. The gates and all the takanen of the roof were of bright, shining stones of Tura. We must here leave King Usertsen the First and turn to a successor whom the monuments call by the double name of Ra Nubka'u. Yemen Numhat the Second. Is that Sanui or how you say second? Okay, see. The noob is the second character. Ra is the first character. So, you know. The second Yemen Numhat trod in the footsteps of its predecessors, extending the southern boundaries of the empire and defending the inhabitants of the south against the incursion of the Negroes. That just seems really weird, calling them Negroes when basically in America, you didn't have to be anywhere near as black as the Egyptians or the Semites or something to be called that. So, okay. By building well-fortified places on that frontier, the possession of this region was of importance to the Egyptian sovereigns because its mountains, besides many precious stones, yielded gold. A stone memorial discovered in Abydos has preserved to us some remarkable notices about the journeys which were undertaken to explore the conquered countries and to urge on the obtaining of the precious metal. Among these is one in which Sa Hatar, a most distinguished official of the court, relates that he opened a mine by the labor of the young men and forced the old to wash the gold. I brought back the produce. I came as far as the further land, Nubia. The Negro inhabitants came to me, subdued by the fear which the Lord of the land inspired them. I entered the land of Heha, visited its watering places, and opened the harbors. The land of Heha lay above the second cataract. Sahatar seems to have been the first to explore the region. Afterwards, under the third Usertsen, an immense stone covered with inscriptions was erected at Semneh, which served as a mark of the Egyptian boundary for the inhabitants of the country of Heha. The same Sa-Hatar, who boasts that he had been sent by His Majesty many times on missions of all kinds, relates in another passage a service of a peculiar description. I was sent over to the building of Yimnu, whose pyramid is called Kherp. May he live forever to superintend the execution of the work upon 15 statues of hard, durable stone. The restoration, what had been thrown down in one day, was completed in 2 months. Never was the like done since the rule of the sun entity Ra. King Imanu, whose name and existence we learn only from this short inscription, appears nowhere on the monuments. He must, at all events, have belonged to the rulers immediately before the 12th dynasty, and in all probability, he was one of the ancestors of the pharaohs of that dynasty. At Tanis, in Lower Egypt, there are traces of the royal power of Yemen-Nemhat. For there was found under the debris and ruins of the destroyed temples the life-size statue in black granite of the wife of this king, who was called by the name of the Fert, which means either the good or the beautiful. The royal lady, with her hair dressed in the ancient fashion, is seated on a throne on which her names and titles are engraved in full. In a memorial tablet at Giza, this queen's name appears again in the following pedigree: Imani, Hunt, the wife, their child, Fuao, Queen Nefert, and Imen-Nemhat II, whose child was Princess Hatshepsut, who married Fuao, and sons included Naben-Wa, and didn't want anybody to know the names of his brothers, apparently. Had them obliterated. I mean, probably it was him. Might have killed his way up to the top or something. And their daughters were Netes Anks, Hatshepsut, Nabat. After a reign of 29 years, the king associated his son with himself, and he bore the names of Ba Zipper, or Usur Sertson II. And okay, wanted to show you that cartouche. You know, this is an old book, just it's reprinted, which is why the king list is not too legible. His history is found only in an isolated passage here and there upon the monuments. We may conclude with certainty from the scattered notices that under the rule of this second Sertson, the empire was at the height of its prosperity. Some lines which are engraved on a rock at the town of Aswan, and which date from the common reign of the two kings, father and son, bear witness that the sovereign's attention was constantly directed to the southern borderland, Nubia. The first king of the 12th dynasty appear in their order in the inscription which adorns the lower border of the hall of sacrifice over Khnum Hatup's rock tomb at Beni Hassan. In order to give a just representation of the public life of those days, a literal translation of the inscription is appended. And I don't feel like I need to read out the, oh, well, I guess I'll say the 98 numbers. 1, the hereditary lord and blood relation of the king who loves his god, the governor. 2, of the district of the east, Khnum Hatep, son of Nahara, who is overcome death. 3, the son of the daughter of a hereditary lord, the Lady Becht, who has overcome death. 4. The same has executed this for his memorial. His first virtue consisted in this, that he was a benefactor. 5. To his town, so that he won for his name lasting remembrance for long ages. 6. And that he, through his good works, immortalized it in his tomb. 7. Of the world below, he made the name of his people to flourish. 8. Who always did works according to their position. Who always did good works according to their position. 9. For good men were the inhabitants of his. 10. Houses, he who distinguished himself among his. 11. Serfs, to him stood open every position. 12. And all honor, as is the custom. 13. His mouth speaks thus. 14. His majesty. 15. Yemen Nemhat the second. 16. Raised me to be. 17. Hereditary lord and governor of the countries of the east. 18. And to be chief priest of Horus, chief priest of Her and the Holy Linus. 6th. And 19. The inheritance of my mother's father in the city of. 20. Manat Xufu, he fixed. 21. For me, the frontier pillar in the south, he set. 22. Up that of the north, corresponding to the quarter of the heavens. 23. He assigned to me the great river in his territory. 24. As had been done to the father. 25. Of my mother from the first. 26. Now an order went forth from the mouth. 27. Of the king's majesty. 28. Sahatap Yabra. 29. Yemen Namhat the first. 30. He made him hereditary lord and governor. 31. Of the countries of the east in the city of Banat Srufu. 32. He fixed the frontier pillar towards the south and set up. 33. The northern corresponding to the quarter of the heavens. He caused him to distribute the great river. 34. Over his province, his eastern boundary. 35. Began from the nome of Drahotehar and extended to the east country. 36. It was at that time when his majesty returned after he had suppressed. 37. The insurrection manifesting himself like the entity Tamu, the evening sun. 38. Himself, he restored that which he found destroyed, taking possession of one town. 40. After another, he informed himself of a town and. 41. Its boundaries up to the next town, placing. 42. Their boundary pillars. 43. According to the quarter of the heavens, taking cognizance of their waters. 44. According to the written registers, estimating them by. 45. Their produce according to the greatness. 46. Of his love of justice, and after this he made him. 47. Hereditary lord and chief officer of the nome of Ma. 48. He fixed for him the front of pillars. 49. His southern boundary was towards 50. The nome of Hermopolis, his northern towards the nome of Canopolis. He distributed for him 51. The great river over his province, 52. His water, his fields, and his groves, and 53. His uncultivated land extended to the districts of the west, 54. He made his eldest son next, 55, who was overcome the highly honored a governor, our prince. Hawk is a ruler. And the numbers just indicate the lines, which I guess it wasn't necessary for me to share that, but I may have thought later that I should have shared it, so I'm sharing it. 56. His inheritance was in the city of Benat Ksufu. 57. As a sign of great acknowledgement. 58. Of the royal favor, a decree. 59. Went forth from the mouth of his majesty. 60. The king. 61. Ra Kasper Ka Usersertsen the first. 62. May his firstborn be noble. 63. My mother entered upon. 64. The dignity of her hereditary lady. And 65. As a daughter of a governor. 66. Of the nome of Ma in the city of Ha Sahatap Ibra. Yemen Hat the first. 67. To become the wife. 68. Of the hereditary lord and governor of the cities. 69. The heart of the king, the lord of Upper Egypt, rejoiced and enchanted was. 70. Lord of Lower Egypt, when he united her to the prefect of the city. 71. Nahara, the highly honored. 72. The king Yemen Nimhat II established me. 73. As the son of a ruler. In the inheritance. 74. Of the government of my mother's father, according to the greatness. 75. Of his love of justice, the entity Tamu. 76. He is himself an Yemen Nimhat II. 77. Made me. 78. A ruler in his 19th year in. 79. The city of Benat Ksufu. There I arranged. 80. And established the abundance of necessaries. 81. Of all sorts of things, and made to flourish. 82. The name of my father, and did good for the dwellings. 83. Of the revered ones and their houses, and I cause sculptures to be carried. 84. To the holy dwelling and arranged for them. 85. Their offerings of pure gifts. 86. And I instituted the officiating priest and was liberal to him. 87. In gifts of land. And 88. Peasants I ordered. 89. The funeral offerings for all the feasts. 90. Of the world below, at the feast of the new year, at the beginning of the year, at the feast of the little year. 91. At the feast of the great year, at the feast of the end of the year. 92. At the feast of joy, the Panegyri. At the feast of the great heat, the summer solstice. I thought the summer solstice is like the August festival. right before you start noticing that it cools down. You got the little heat, the solstice, the little heat, and the great heat. I don't know which word they're using though. At the feast of the 5 intercalary days, 94. Of the year at the festival of Shattat, at the festival of the sand, 95. At the 12 monthly feasts, at the 12 half monthly feasts, 96. At the feasts on the plain and on the mountain, and should, 97. The priest or any other person, 98. Cease to do all this, may he. Stomachs. May he perish, and may, 99, his son not sit in his seat. A close examination of the words gives occasion for some very interesting observations, which enables us to form just ideas as to the nature and method of the public administration of the country. The nobility was in possession of certain rights, either by birth or by alliance with a daughter who was heiress. These rights became valid through a royal decision. It was requisite that the king should issue his commands with regard to them. Above all, the position of the Hawk, or the prince governors of the nomes, was of great importance and requires to be accurately understood in order to comprehend many events in the course of Egyptian history, which overthrew whole dynasties and interrupted the ordinary course of affairs and of the government of the country. Another observation which forces itself upon the reader is the mode of fixing the boundaries of the nomes at the time of the inundations, which acted as a check upon the inevitable disputes as to boundaries between neighboring princes of nomes and governors of towns. It facilitated the drawing up of the written registers, which, in the name of Pharaoh, contained an exact survey of the territories thus bounded, according to which the taxes were levied. Another observation of a more scientific nature concerns the festivals of the ancient Egyptian calendar. The learned men on the banks of the Nile occupied themselves watching the courses of the stars and studying their complete cycles with the regularly recurring seasons. They had already firmly settled ideas of the various lengths thus assigned to the year, in order the better to judge of this very interesting question, which we give the translation of another calendrical inscription engraved and beautifully cut hieroglyphs over the entrance door to the mortuary chapel of Khnum Hatep at Beni Hassan. We have arranged in a tabular form the series of the so-called Feasts of the Dead mentioned therein in order that they may be easily understood. The days of the months added here and there are taken from other monuments, which thus more clearly determine the time of several feasts. A, the feast of the year, so the feast of the new year, the vague or civil year, the feast of the great year, the Gothic or the fixed year, the feast of the little year, the lunar year, and the feast of the month, the feast of the great heat at the beginning of Mekher, the feast of the little heat at the beginning of Feminoth, the feast of the days, the feast on the first, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 8th, 15th, 17th, 29th, and 30th day of each month. The 5 intercalary days of the year. The special feasts. The feast of the rising of Sothis, Sirius. The feast called Uwak, the 17th to 18th of Drahota, the feast of Drahoti, the 19th of Jahuti, the feast of navigation, the feast of the commencement of the inundation, the feast of the Bark Tepet, the great feast of joy, the Panagiri, the good feast on the mountain, the feast called Asha. So, I don't remember the Egyptian name for Cyrus, but Source. It's close to Cyrus. Anyways, Sothis is kind of like a Greek name for it. A comparison of these feasts with the catalog of holidays given in the long inscription just quoted enables us to perceive that the latter, although on the whole less complete, nevertheless contains 3 feasts, more namely the feast of the beginning of the year, another feast at the end of the year, and the feast of Shatat. The paintings with which the tomb of Khnum-Hotep is covered are invaluable for teaching of the arts and trades, as well as of the domestic and public life of the Egyptians of this time. Among the countless representatives with which the hall of sacrifices are adorned, attention is due to the scene of the entry of a strange race into Egypt. A family belonging to the people of Aamu had left their native land in the days of Usertsen II and migrated to the banks of the Nile. The immigrants numbered 37 persons consisting of men, women, and children, who are represented as coming to Khnum-Hotep, begging for a gracious reception and offering him a present of the eye paint called mestum.